Chat. This is going to be an analysis of my most recent PB. It's going to be more in-depth than my last commentary video, which went over the general route. This time, I'll focus a bit more on what parts of the run went well, where I could save time, some of my decision making, etc. There's going to be a lot of talking, so if you'd prefer to watch the raw footage without commentary, that'll be linked in the description as well. A quick overview of the run. The goal of this category is to beat the Moonlord as fast as possible. Random seed effectively means that I've never seen this world before because it's randomly generated. NMA stands for no major abuses, which bans certain glitches and strategies. The first objective of the run is to get the demolitionists to move in. Dynamite is used both to build the Hellevator as well as to deal damage all the way up until the mech bosses. Over the past few months, it's become more and more popular to look for loot before building houses, rather than chopping trees and building houses straight away. This is largely due to early games becoming more optimized, and thus requiring heavier resetting. Usually I'll loot a hill cave, living tree, or pyramid to get the run started. Here I'm using the housing query to scan for a pyramid. If it says this room is too big, that means there's a pyramid there. There are 5 NPCs that can move in during pre-hard mode: the guide, merchant, demo, nurse, and arms dealer. So I build 5 houses. You may have noticed that I transformed a slime into the Squire slime earlier in the run. These town slimes are a new 1.4.4 edition. You can obtain the Squire slime by throwing a copper helmet or short sword onto a colored slime. They can occupy the same house as another NPC, which makes them useful for obtaining pylons. To do so with this vertical housing build, you'll need a gap between the table and chair, which is why I'm using a workbench instead of a table for one house. NPCs need back walls to move in, and since the guide is already spawned in, his house won't need any walls, but I'll fill in the other 4 houses with walls. Current patch runs always head to the jungle for loot. The underground jungle is very open, so not much digging is required. This desert didn't have any water leaf. Water leaf is an ingredient for the obsidian skin potion, which is used to loot Hellstone for the molten pickaxe later on. There are ways to loot Hellstone without an obsidian skin, but they're usually quite slow comparatively. Jungles always have a main cave, which is an opening that can path all the way down to the underworld. The main cave very frequently gets blocked off by beehives or the jungle temple, which is really annoying, but it's still optimal to head down main instead of entering hill caves like these. You can see that I pull up the map here, and it's because I realized the opening I just passed was main. At least 20 obsidian is required to finish the run, because the molten pickaxe requires 20 hellstone bars. It's usually nice to pick up a couple more for obsidian skin potions as well. In NPCs, move-in priority is based on their ID. Nurse has a higher priority than the demo, so it's optimal to wait until the demo moves in to use life crystals. Quick lava bath is one of the most important parts of the run, don't question it. This was probably my best jungle exit ever. For me, anything under around 7.5 minutes for a jungle exit is good. My mobility is fantastic, 280 HP from jungle alone is extremely lucky, and I ended up with a ton of money. These are the main things that runners look for from jungle. In my opinion, at least 25 gold is required for a comfortable Hellevator. I had 58 after selling loot here. While I start on the Hellevator, I craft a bed and manage my inventory. This just makes it so the time I spend processing my inventory and looking for the sawmill in the crafting menu isn't completely wasted. A bed is used to set my spawn point in the underworld, so I won't have to drop down the Hellevator multiple times. Items that I don't need right away go into the piggy. There's multiple points in this run where I can take them out without losing time, so there's no point cluttering my inventory. The Hellevator acts as both a way to reach the underworld and as a second chance to obtain loot. From an objective perspective, you can merge this segment with the jungle segment. What matters is the time that you finish the Hellevator at and the loot that you have by the end of the Hellevator. A poor jungle exit can be salvaged with a lucky Hellevator, and a fast jungle exit can be ruined by a slow Hellevator. For me, a good Hellevator finish would be reaching the underworld in under 11 minutes.
1.4 added a feature where if you kill the guide with lava in the underworld, it will spawn the wall of flesh. This housing setup might seem a bit confusing. At night, NPCs will teleport to the first solid block beneath their NPC flag. The NPC flag, when initially set, has to be above a solid block. I use platforms beneath the bed to force the guide to teleport into the trap compartment. The bed counts as a chair for making the house valid, but not as a chair that an NPC can sit in, so the guide won't teleport to the bed afterwards. Finally, a door is used for bed warping. Removing a block invalidates the house. The next time I recall, it will be to the world spawn. The door closes when I recall, and the silt block atop it falls into place, revalidating the house. The next time I recall, it will be to my bed. The run has been super smooth so far. The only things I'm really lacking are featherfall potions and herbs. Of course, the run's gonna go downhill from here. The last bit of prep we need for hard mode is to visit the Crimson. 6 vert is required to craft each mechanical worm, and we'll use Crimstone blocks to farm souls later. This is the main reason speedruns are done on Crimson World. Mobs are easier to farm, and the terrain is easier to navigate. The dungeon on this seed is absurdly close to spawn, closer to the center of the world than the edge. You can see on the map here that the Crimson could really have been on either sides. There's a lot of space past jungle and a lot past dungeon. It could even be on both sides since there are 2 Crimson caves per small world. Since I'm already here and I still need water leaf, I decide to continue to the right. Unfortunately, there's a second set of living trees that I have to dig through. These trees alone probably lost me over half a minute. I didn't get any bottles from chests, so I have to craft some as well as picking up a bucket. Having a water bucket lets me craft water bottles during vert farming rather than sitting still and crafting them, so it will save a little bit of time. I only get one death lead from this Crimson, but I decided to recall instead of looking for more. I already lost a lot of time going to the wrong side, so I figured it would be better to high roll Deathweed. If I smash altars before farming souls, there's a chance that I could pick up Deathweed in the Crimson Cave and have battle potions for souls. I always farm Vert with Lava on Master Mode. It's much safer and allows me to craft items and organize my inventory while farming Vert. Most Crimson mobs spawn on Crimstone blocks regardless of what biome you're in, so that's why this works. Despite having a good Hellevator time, the run is set up pretty terribly now. I don't have the ingredients for a builder's potion, which loses quite a bit of time on building the Wall of Flesh bridge and on souls, and I don't have any extra Deathweed for battle potions, I don't have any Featherfall potions, and I don't have a water candle from the dungeon. This box is built for the Destroyer later on. Harpies don't spawn in the center 10th of the world during pre-hard mode, so it's much easier to build now than later. $500 blocks is approximately what you'll need for the Wall of Flesh bridge. Sometimes you get a lot of buildings to use for the bridge, and sometimes you won't get any at all. Sometimes the terrain squishes the wall so you hit multiple segments at once, etc. It's a bit of a judgment call. I only had one building to integrate, so I used around 560 blocks this run. Without a builder potion, this ends up losing a lot of time. I got some very good Wall of Flesh drops this run. Breaker Blade is the second best weapon in my opinion, and the Ghost Skull is integral for the Twins and Skeletron Prime fight later on. 24-21 is a really slow Wall of Flesh split. At least the run is alive because I have the Ghost Skull. It might seem like a fast split because it's far ahead of the previous world record, but by current standards it's pretty slow. There's easily several minutes of time to save here. The next couple segments can be done in any order. We need to farm Souls of Knights and Lights, as well as obtain a hard mode anvil in order to craft the mechanical boss summons. If I have an Obsidian Skin Potion, I almost always grab Hellstone first in order to craft the Molten Pickaxe. Recently, I've been finding that smashing altars before farming souls is better for a few reasons. The first reason is Deathweed. As I mentioned before, I have a chance to obtain battle potions for souls if I visit Crimson first. The second is that I'll usually have leftover speed bonuses from the Wall of Flesh fight. The movement speed is much better used traveling to Crimson than throwing dynamite. Thirdly, I'll usually need to bedwarp to buy more dynamite anyways, so I don't lose any time bedwarping to the surface. And finally, it gives me a chance to look for ores during souls. There's a lot of downtime during souls, so I can examine the map between dynamite throws or run into ore veins while traversing the underworld. I get a few very lucky palladium veins in the Crimson, so I decide to mine those before smashing more altars. If I did them in the other order, I could have my mining interrupted by wraiths. Unfortunately, I didn't find any Deathweed in this Crimson, so I'll be doing souls without any spawn boosters. The reason I build my farm so high up is because the spawn rates in the cavern layer are much better than in the underworld. The farm consists of a crimstone bridge for enemies to spawn on, and a dresser to throw dynamite on. Blocks with a chest or dresser on them are explosive proof. Standing in front of background walls prevents certain mobs from spawning. The relevant mobs here are Crimson Axes, Enchanted Swords, Chaos Elementals, and Floaty Grosses. You'll notice that I'm spam clicking the drill rather than holding down left click. The drill mines once per click, so you can achieve faster mining speeds by spam clicking it. I get really lucky with ores and obtain everything I need for the hard mode anvil in the underworld. Doing so also lets me task overlap crafting the anvil with souls farming. finished the Souls and Anvil segments at around 38.5 minutes, which is cutting it pretty close. Nighttime ends at 44:15. The next few bosses are all nocturnal bosses, the mechanical bosses and Skeletron. There's not enough time to kill Skeletron, farm bones for the Skeletron Prime summons, and kill all 4 bosses in the same night, so they're split up. We'll kill Destroyer and Skeletron this night. There's a lot to understand for this Destroyer insta-kill. Bosses, just like normal mobs, have a spawning range. They can't spawn too close or too far from the player, and they have to spawn on a block. The single Palladium ore 74 blocks below me is the only valid spawning block for the Destroyer. When it spawns, it's completely coiled, so each dynamite will damage dozens of segments. Dynamite has a use time of 40, meaning I can throw one every 2/3 of a second. Throwing 7 dynamite will take 14/3 of a second. Dynamite blows up after 5 seconds, meaning if I want to throw 7 dynamite before summoning the Destroyer, I'll have 1/3 of a second of leniency across all 7 dynamites combined. Waiting for the dynamite to fall 18 blocks is a way for me to more easily time the dynamite throws. Additionally, the player won't take knockback while riding a minecart. Using a minecart allows us to jump away from the probes while still keeping knockback resistance. I botched the Destroyer insta-kill pretty badly in this run. I threw my first few dynamite too slowly, so I kept throwing more before spawning the Destroyer. With 340 HP and cross necklace though, this is really unnecessary. I can stay and throw dynamite for a very long time before recalling. Additionally, the Destroyer killed the merchant, which actually impacted the run quite a bit, as you'll see later on. I was pretty scared of Skeletron this run because it didn't have a Featherfall potion, so I ended up building an arena which wasted a lot of time. There are a few objectives in the dungeon. The first is to rescue either the wizard or mechanic. The wizard sells the ice rod and the mechanic sells junction boxes. Both of these will allow you to place blocks in midair, which will be useful for the pillars segment. The second is to obtain a gun or bullets for the arm sealer to move in. In this run, I got a handgun from the golden chest. Thirdly, you need 30 bones to craft a mechanical skull. On Expert Plus, mobs drop a lot more bones than on Classic, so I usually don't bother making a dedicated farm. However, this dungeon segment ends up being horribly slow because I can't find the mechanic. I specifically moved the merchant into the house next to my bed so that I can sell items and buy arrows, anvils, mana potions, the forest pylon, and sharpening station from him while sleeping. Not having the merchant this run did end up losing me a decent chunk of time, since I had to improvise instead of doing what I always do in practice. Since I have to sleep until nighttime anyways, I spend a bit of time organizing my inventory to make the upcoming Shimmer segment faster. Filling my inventory with torches makes it easier to clean later on, since I won't pick up as much trash. A couple of funny time losses on my way to Shimmer. If you remember from half an hour ago, I looted an umbrella from a wooden chest, but I decided to sell it because I thought it would be useless since I had the flying carpet. Having an umbrella helps a lot with ghost skull movement, so I'll need to remember not to trash that next time. A sandstorm in the desert loses me a bit of time as well, but it's more of an annoyance than anything. And finally, I pick up the water beneath me, which causes me to fall into the water because water walking doesn't work well with flowing liquids. My Shimmer pool is very deep this run, which loses some time as well. It'll also mean that I'll lose time grabbing the shiny red balloon later on, but I'll explain that later. If you're unfamiliar with Shimmer, it's a liquid that transforms some items and decrafts others. Firstly, I use it to reforge my hallowed repeater. Then, I'll shimmer anvils for iron to craft the mechanical boss summons, unnecessary potions for various herbs, recalls for specular fish to craft seafood dinners, water buckets for honey and lava buckets, and cycle my emblem for a ranger emblem. I can also shimmer my molten pickaxe for an imp staff, then re-shimmer the staff for a molten chestplate since the imps will persist after losing the staff. I forgot to shimmer my suspicious looking eye for lenses and an iron bar for iron ore to craft iron skin potions. So overall, this was a pretty sloppy shimmer segment. Using the Squire Slime and Demo, I set up a cavern pylon at the Shimmer so I'll be able to change my emblem and reuse hallowed bars later on. With the Gold Skull, this fight is pretty simple. The main concern is Retinazer. His laser is really quick and inaccurate, which makes it hard to dodge. The solution to this is to just not let Retinazer shoot at all. By positioning yourself optimally, you can stop Retinazer from shooting for a majority of the fight. I mentioned earlier that the Gold Skull plays an integral role in the mechanical boss fights, but it's only somewhat true. I'll first talk about it from my personal point of view. For me, there are two reliable win conditions: using the Gold Skull combined with the Shield of Cthulhu, or using Developer Wings. It's very possible to win these fights without either the Gold Skull or Dev Wings, but I've only done so once in a run, so realistically I'm relying on the 1/3 chance to obtain one of these items. But from a general point of view, the fight can be done consistently without either of these. There have been cheeses developed for every single hard mode boss, and even without special setups, just using the nerfs is enough to make both of these fights consistent. I personally don't use a lot of these strategies because I prefer running without them, but there's definitely a decent chunk of time to be saved from using them. For Retinazer's second phase, I box myself in to remove line of sight so it doesn't shoot at me. However, this can be done much faster if you use block clipping. I've used it in my previous runs before, but I decided to stop using it a while ago. The setup is slightly faster and it doesn't block your Bone Glove shots either, so you end up with a bit more DPS. The Skeletron Prime fight is very straightforward since there's no real strategy to it. Of course, there is a teleporter setup for this fight as well. The fight itself is much faster with teleporters since you can use unholy arrows. The arrows will hit the Prime on the way up and on the way down with 100% accuracy. However, the setup takes a lot of time, so I'm not actually sure how much time it saves. Since I couldn't buy the forest pylon from the merchant the previous night, I'll have to rearrange some NPC flags to buy it from him. Since 3 more NPCs have moved in, the town is too crowded for him to sell the pylon. This NPC moving strategy only works consistently during nighttime. Blind Force set, may he rest in peace, does save a bit of time and makes the upcoming bosses much easier. Without Dev Wings, I'd have to farm Wyverns for Souls of Flight in order to craft Beetle Wings later on. I spent quite a bit of time crafting potions here, which I could have done without losing time if my Shimmer segment was cleaner. Check the jungle map to see the brick type of the jungle shrines. The brick type is correlated with a few other world gen features, such as the shimmer depth and the location of the floating island containing the balloon. Additionally, the floating island with the balloon will generate above a surface tunnel unless it's been removed by world gen. The island with the balloon ended up being extremely far right on this run, which meant that I had to take a costly detour for it. I can't fight Moonlord without the balloon, so it's a mandatory time loss for me, but usually I'll be able to pick it up on my way to dungeon or jungle. This is a strat that runners call Chicken Teriyaki. After reaching full speed on a minecart, you move off of the rails with a Featherfall potion to travel through the air quickly. With the Shield of Cthulhu, you can instantly gain full speed on a minecart if you dash and then mount to the top rail on a diagonal rail like this. I don't know why it works, but I'll leave a couple of videos explaining it in the description. The Plantera arena consists of an open area for phase 1 and a long shaft for phase 2. Plantera's spiky balls will persist for a little while into phase 2, so I like to have part of the shaft above the open area from phase 1. I decide to begin bombing the shaft before I even find the Plantera's bulb. This way I don't have to dig upwards before I start bombing like I would if I found the bulb first. 1.4.4 increased Plantera's despawn timer by a huge amount, so it's fine if the bulb ends up being far away from my arena. The bulb location in this run was almost perfect. It's right next to my arena, so I didn't need to wait much for Plantera to arrive, and it's right above the jungle tempo, which means that the golem split won't take so long. If you've seen classic mode speedruns, you'll know that the hallowed jousting lance is used for almost all of the hard mode bosses, and the same can be true for master mode. The lance is a weapon that gains damage based on the player's speed, and with the mechanical minecart, the lance can deal well over 2000 damage per second. Using lance instead of repeater for Plantera will save a couple of minutes, and additionally, since you'd use the lance on Golem and Cultist as well, using melee gear for the entirety of these segments doesn't lose time at all. I finished the fight on top of the jungle tempo so I can head in straight away. I don't get any useful weapons from Plantera, which does lose quite a bit of time. The Seedler and Venus Magnum are both stronger than the Hallowed Repeater, and the Pygmy Staff with the Summoner Helmet is significantly stronger than our Ranger build as well. But of course, none of this matters if you use the Lance. The Lance can lower the fight time to under a minute, although it does require moving in the nerfs. On a run like this, I'd have to sleep or nighttime to use the Lance. I forgot to craft ale while sleeping for nighttime, and I trashed my sand, so I'm not gonna have ale for the rest of the run. I'm pretty sloppy with managing my accessories, so I do lose a ton of time messing up the teriyaki. In hindsight, I should have swapped the shield for the Magiluminescence until the Moonlord fight, since I don't need Magi at all. I do use the lance to kill Cultist. The boss has always been cheesed, so I don't have any qualms with using lance for this. The setup for the Cultist on Master Mode is slightly more complicated than on Classic, because of the risk of Ancient Dooms in Phase 2. The platform layer above me messes up my counting, which made the setup for this really slow. The Cultist is naturally out of range for the lance, so we need to manipulate its position. When it's about to teleport, we move down to the lower set of rails. After it teleports, we move upwards to deal damage to the Cultist. The lance's hitbox is currently bugged, so holding it at an angle gives it more range than it should have. Vortex Pillar spawns on top of a tree, which is pretty much the worst possible spot it can spawn on. The only mob spawns that I get are the ones from the portals, so the pillar ends up taking forever. By overlaying the map and zooming out, I can take a look at the pillar's layouts and the terrain for each one while shooting. Putting Vortex Pillar aside, my terrain for the other three pillars is pretty good. Unfortunately, I do lose over half a minute waiting for a Stardust cell to spawn. Building this box to shoot the cells from is much safer than kiting them, especially after their buff in 1.4.4. I hammer one of the blocks above and below me to give the cells line of sight of the player. Without line of sight, the cells wander around much more slowly instead of padding to the player immediately. Once I obtained the second Stardust cell banner, the pillar's shield is down. I used the Shimmer pylon to despawn the cells before taking out the pillar. A few hours prior to this run, I was experimenting with using Stardust cells with the Stardust Dragon, and I was too focused on this to notice that I forgot to craft the Summoner Helmet. Using a Ranger build instead of a Summoner build loses over 40 seconds on Solar Pillar. My arrows were also disappearing because I built the farm so high up, and projectiles disappear if they travel over 40 blocks above the top of the world. On top of this, I forgot to buy mana potions to use the Ice Rod in summons, since the merchant died during Destroyer. Putting this aside, there's even a faster way to set up this cheese if you don't mind block clipping. So overall, there's probably like a minute to be saved on Solar Pillar alone. Nebula Pillar went fine for the most part. This star prevents Nebula floaters from attacking through line of sight abuse. They'll charge at the player if they don't have line of sight type B, and fire lasers at the player if they have line of sight type A. With this setup, they'll pretty much only charge at the player if they're directly below the star. I don't use Nebula weapons at all, so there's no point in collecting them, but overall there's definitely several minutes of time to save on pillars. I ran out of recall potions in my previous PB, which is why this pillar split still ended up saving time. Since I bombed the trees next to spawn and there's a hill cave on the right, I decided that it would be better to fight Moonlord on the left. The Moonlord fight consists of 3 parts: Phase 1, a transition period, and Phase 2. The premise is to pop the eyes out at specific times so that all 3 true Eyes of Cthulhu will do the same attack at the same time in the second phase. Overall, the run was pretty subpar. The jungle exit and Hellevator were great, but everything sort of fell apart after that. I got good RNG in the big moments, like I got Ghost Skull for mechanical bosses, Dev Wings for Plantera and Golem, good Plantera's bulb location, and a large Golem room, but aside from that, the luck wasn't that good. And this is just a characteristic of the category. Like the runs that are PBs usually aren't the best runs, but they're just the runs that survive. I don't like to talk about theoretical times because I'm always wrong, but this run's definitely beatable, and I'll be streaming my attempts to beat it on Twitch if you'd like to watch. Thanks for watching.